What if everything you thought you knew about life, about death, was wrong? Imagine being pulled back from the edge of eternity, only to return with a message so powerful it could change the course of history. This is the story of Nathaniel Walker, an ordinary man who died, but when he returned, he was anything but ordinary. With him came a message from Jesus Christ, a message so urgent, so crucial that it was meant for one man, Donald Trump. But Nathaniel's return wasn't without its trials. His journey would take him through a world where faith was questioned, where powerful forces sought to silence the truth. This is a story of divine intervention, a spiritual battle, and a president who would have to decide whether to trust in the message that could save not just him, but the future of the country. Stay with us. The battle for America's soul is about to begin, and the power of faith is more than just a story. It's a weapon. Nathaniel Walker had never believed in miracles. He had lived a full life, a family man, a successful businessman in Florida, but death? He'd always thought of it as the end. That is, until the day he collapsed from a heart attack. One moment he was laughing with his wife, the next, he was gone. The doctors worked tirelessly for over an hour, but Nathaniel was gone. His heart had stopped beating. His body grew cold. The room was silent. The machines flatlined. But that wasn't the end. Nathaniel awoke with a start, gasping for breath, his heart pounding. His eyes fluttered open to find himself lying on a soft golden expanse. The light was blinding, too brilliant to describe. And then, standing before him, was a figure. Jesus Christ. His presence radiated peace, but also a stern authority. He looked at Nathaniel, not with judgment, but with compassion. "You were meant for more, Nathaniel," Jesus spoke, his voice echoing in Nathaniel's very soul. "I've brought you back because you have a message to deliver." Nathaniel's throat was dry. A message for who? Jesus paused, his gaze unwavering. For Donald J. Trump. Nathaniel woke up in the hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses, their faces full of shock. He had been dead. There was no logical explanation for why he was alive again, but he knew it wasn't an accident. He'd been brought back for a reason. The message was burning in his heart, a fire that refused to be extinguished. As soon as he could, he told his wife what had happened. She thought it was a hallucination, a side effect of his near-death experience. But Nathaniel knew better. He had seen Jesus. He had been chosen. He had to deliver the message. But how? Nathaniel struggled with his new reality. The world had changed in the short time he had been gone. The news was filled with chaos, riots, political division, rising tensions around the globe. He realized that the message he carried wasn't just for Trump, it was for the entire nation. He started with small steps, calling religious leaders, reaching out to friends who had once shared his faith. Everyone dismissed him. His story sounded too wild, too impossible. People thought he had gone mad. But Nathaniel knew that Jesus had chosen him, and he would not be silenced. One night, as he prayed, seeking guidance, a stranger appeared at his doorstep. He was tall, wearing a dark suit, and his eyes were intense. "I know who you are, Nathaniel," the man said, his voice low. "I can help you get to him." Nathaniel's heart raced as he boarded the plane, disguised under a new identity, following the instructions given by the mysterious stranger. He was headed to Washington, D.C., but this was no ordinary meeting. This was the meeting that could change everything. When he arrived at the White House, security was tight. He was ushered through underground corridors, past guards who seemed to look through him, as though they knew who he was, but didn't care. Finally, he entered a private room where Trump sat at a desk, reviewing documents. The president looked up as Nathaniel entered, his expression unreadable. "You have a message for me?" Trump asked. Nathaniel nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. He had one shot. "I died," Nathaniel began, his voice steady. "I saw Jesus, and he sent me back with a message for you. The future of this nation depends on the choices you make." Nathaniel shared everything he had learned in his encounter with Jesus. The words Jesus had spoken to him echoed in his mind, clear and powerful. Donald J. Trump is not just a man, but a vessel. You are a man of destiny, but your path is not without great peril. The world will turn against you, and even those closest to you will betray you. But if you hold fast to faith, if you trust in me, you will lead the nation through a time of darkness and into a new era of unity. The enemies are many, but the power of prayer, the power of the people, is greater than any force of evil. Trump listened intently, his face unreadable. The weight of the words settled into the room like a storm. "I've always known there was something bigger at play here," Trump said quietly, his voice filled with an emotion Nathaniel had never seen in him before, "but I never knew it was this." What do you think of Nathaniel's mission? Could Jesus really have sent him back to deliver a message to President Trump? Do you believe that faith has the power to change the course of history? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and share this story because the battle between faith and doubt is only just beginning. In the weeks following their meeting, Nathaniel and President Trump found themselves in a silent yet powerful struggle. Trump had never been a particularly religious man. His faith, while present, had always been more of a personal matter than something central to his political life. But the message Nathaniel delivered, the words of Jesus Christ himself, had shaken him to his core. Late one evening, as the weight of the prophecy began to consume him, Trump invited Nathaniel to a private meeting at the White House. They were joined by several prominent pastors, men of God who had spent their lives preaching faith and standing against the spiritual darkness that threatened to overtake the world. "We need to understand this, Nathaniel," one of the pastors said, his voice stern yet filled with compassion. "The battle you're speaking of isn't just political. This is a spiritual battle, one that requires more than words. It demands faith." Trump shifted uneasily in his seat, his eyes flicking between the men in the room. "What am I supposed to do with all of this? The enemies are everywhere, and every day the stakes grow higher. I can't do this alone." Nathaniel, his eyes steady and unwavering, responded, "You're not alone. We're in this together. Jesus has called you for this time. You've been chosen to lead, to stand firm against the darkness, but you have to believe it with every fiber of your being." The pastor laid his hands on Trump's shoulders, praying with fervor. "Father, give this man the strength to lead, to understand the path you've set before him. May he find courage in your word, and may he see your light even in the darkest moments." Nathaniel watched, seeing the transformation take place within Trump. It wasn't immediate, but there was a shift. It was like the walls around Trump's heart began to soften, and for the first time he allowed himself to truly trust in the divine message Nathaniel had brought him. As the weeks went by, the political climate grew even more volatile. News outlets had already begun calling Nathaniel a fraud, a false prophet, and a tool of conspiracy. But despite the backlash, Nathaniel remained steadfast. He knew the truth of what he had witnessed, and he was determined to stand by it. One afternoon, as Nathaniel sat with a group of believers in a small chapel, he saw a vision, one that shook him to his core. The scene was one of chaos, streets filled with protesters, violence erupting in every corner of America. The nation was on the brink of collapse, torn apart by division, hatred, and strife. In the vision, he saw Trump standing at the center of it all, his hands raised to the heavens. Around him stood a circle of angels, their swords glowing with divine fire, pushing back the darkness that threatened to consume everything. But there was a twist. One of Trump's closest allies, someone he trusted, turned against him. The betrayal was swift and brutal, causing Trump to stumble. Yet, even in that moment of vulnerability, Jesus appeared before him, his face full of sorrow and compassion. "Do not be afraid," Jesus spoke, his voice echoing in the vision. "I am with you. The battle you fight is not of flesh and blood, but of principalities and powers. Stand firm, for I have anointed you for this time." Nathaniel knew this vision wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. The time for silence was over. The world had to know what was coming. As Trump wrestled with his faith, the enemies that sought to destroy him began to close in. They weren't just political rivals or media pundits. They were shadowy figures, operatives, elites, and dark forces who operated from the shadows. Their goal was simple: to tear down everything Trump represented and to stop the message Nathaniel carried. One night, as Nathaniel prayed in his hotel room, the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. His breath came out in shallow gasps, his skin prickling with a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the room grew darker still. A voice whispered, cold and filled with malice, "You will not succeed. We will silence you." Nathaniel's heart raced, but he stood firm. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave." The darkness hissed, but the presence retreated. Nathaniel knew that this was only the beginning. He wasn't just fighting a political war, he was in the middle of a spiritual battle. A few days later, Trump called for another meeting. This time, the pastors who had prayed with him earlier were present, and this time the atmosphere in the room was different. Trump was different. He stood before them, a man transformed by faith. "I've seen the darkness," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've felt it trying to take hold of me, of this country. But I believe now. I believe that the message Nathaniel brought me is real. I have been chosen." The pastors nodded, their hearts full of hope. "You have indeed been chosen, Mr. President, and it is by the grace of God that you are here. But the battle is far from over." Nathaniel stepped forward, holding out his Bible. "Remember the words Jesus spoke to me. Stand firm, even when the world turns against you, even when those closest to you betray you. Stand firm." Trump's gaze was steady, his resolve hardening. "Then I'll stand firm." As predicted, betrayal came swiftly. One of Trump's closest allies, a man he had trusted, turned on him publicly, accusing him of hypocrisy and corruption. The media had a field day, and the pressure mounted. Trump felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but through it all, he held firm to his faith. Nathaniel stood by his side, offering prayer and support, but the attacks only grew more intense. People who once stood with Trump now sought to tear him down. His faith was tested daily, and yet he found strength in the message Nathaniel had brought him. The enemy was relentless, but Trump was no longer fighting alone. It wasn't long before the nation reached a boiling point. Protests turned into riots and chaos spread across the country. The world was watching, and the question on everyone's mind was whether Trump would be able to weather the storm. One evening, as the situation grew increasingly dire, Trump found himself alone in the Oval Office, his thoughts heavy. He opened his Bible and read the passage that Nathaniel had shown him months ago. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Isaiah 1:10, a peace washed over him. He was no longer just a man fighting for power. He was a servant of a higher purpose. The miracle came in the form of peace, a peace that Trump and the nation so desperately needed. The last few months had been filled with constant strife, protests, accusations, and seemingly endless division. But something shifted in the air, a spiritual presence that couldn't be denied. Trump spent more time in prayer than he ever had before, his once cynical heart now searching for answers. His faith had been tested time and time again, but each time something divine pulled him through. He remembered the words Jesus had spoken to him, the vision Nathaniel had shared, the promise that his purpose was far greater than mere politics. One night, as Trump sat alone in the Oval Office, the doors to his private study swung open, and in walked a group of pastors, including those who had prayed with him months earlier. Their faces were filled with anticipation, but Trump's expression was pensive. "Mr. President," one of the pastors said, "we're seeing something incredible happen. People across the country are starting to see the truth in your words. They're turning to faith in ways we haven't seen before." Trump nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling in his heart. "I feel it too. I know I've been called for something greater, but I've also seen how easy it is for the enemy to attack." The pastor placed a hand on Trump's shoulder. "You're not fighting alone. We stand with you, and we stand with the truth of God's word." As they prayed together, something changed within Trump. His heart, once burdened by doubts, was now filled with clarity. He understood that the battle wasn't just political, it was a battle of souls, a war for the heart of the nation. And God had called him to lead it. The final battle came in a way that no one could have predicted. It wasn't with an army of foreign nations or a political opponent, but rather an internal struggle. The world had grown increasingly divided, and Trump felt the pressure mount every day. His political opponents were relentless, but so were the spiritual forces at play. It wasn't until one late night, when he was lying awake in his bed, that Trump understood the true nature of the war. The darkness wasn't just outside. It was within too. He had been betrayed by friends, by allies, even by those who had once believed in him. The trust he had placed in people had been shattered, but through it all, one thing remained: his faith. One evening, Trump stood before the mirror, looking at himself. He wasn't the same man who had entered the White House. He had been reshaped, refined by the fires of trial in the hand of God. In that moment, a knock came at the door. It was Nathaniel. "I've been praying for you, Mr. President," Nathaniel said. "The battle is not over, but I believe you're ready." Trump smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I never thought I'd find peace in this fight, but I see now that this is bigger than politics. It's about the soul of our country." Nathaniel nodded. "It's about standing firm in the face of darkness and trusting that God is with us, always." Together they knelt and prayed, asking for strength and wisdom. Trump knew that this battle, no matter how hard, was one he was meant to fight, and the truth was that he had already won. The final months of Trump's presidency were marked by an unexpected turn of events. Despite the growing opposition, a wave of change washed over the nation. Where there had been chaos, there was now clarity. Where there had been division, there was now a sense of unity. Trump, now more than ever, spoke openly about his faith. He wasn't afraid to address the nation with the truth he had learned, God's word. He no longer focused on the partisan fights or the political games. He focused on the future of the country, on restoring its moral compass, and on serving the will of God. "America," he declared in a powerful speech, "is a nation founded on principles of freedom and faith. We are not perfect, but we have been given a great responsibility. We must return to the values that built this country. We must turn to God and trust in His plan." And something incredible happened. People began to listen. No longer was Trump seen as just a politician. He was seen as a man on a divine mission. The people rallied behind him, not because of his policies, but because they saw a man who had been transformed by faith, who was speaking a truth that transcended party lines. Nathaniel, who had been with Trump every step of the way, watched as the nation began to heal. The vision Jesus had shared with him had come true. Trump had not only survived the storm, he had led the country through it. As time passed, the aftermath of Trump's presidency left an indelible mark on the nation. America was still a land of diversity, with its challenges and faults, but something had shifted. The focus had returned to faith, to family, and to the values that had been forgotten in the chaos of the world. Trump's legacy wasn't one of politics, but of purpose. His words, once divisive, were now filled with wisdom. The country had seen the man, the leader, who had stood at the crossroads and chosen to trust in God, even when it seemed impossible. For Nathaniel, the mission was complete. He had delivered the message that God had sent him to deliver, and now he could rest easy. He knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and though it had been a difficult and dangerous journey, it had been worth it. As Nathaniel stood outside the White House one last time, he gazed up at the towering structure, a symbol of the power of faith in the midst of struggle. "I did what I was called to do," he whispered to himself, "and now it's in God's hands." The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the horizon. Nathaniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. It was time for a new chapter. This journey is a reminder of the power of faith. What do you think about the role of divine intervention in politics? Can one person really change the course of history? Share your thoughts in the comments below, like this video, and subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Together, we can bring light to the darkness.